David Yeager is a semi-retired oil service executive and entrepreneur. Since 1970, he has worked in multiple oil service sector segments, and from 1987 to 2012 was a founder, senior officer, and director of 3 successful TSX-listed oil service companies. From 2012 to 2016, he served as national leader of oilfield services for MNP LLP, a leading Canadian tax, accounting, and consulting provider. Through Yeager Management Limited, he currently consults as an executive finance and management advisor to oil service companies, as well as presenting upstream oil and gas industry overviews and trends to companies, boards, industry associations, and other organizations. David Yeager has been active in business journalism and energy policy analysis since 1979. He has authored numerous energy policy position papers for oil service trade associations. He is a regular commentator about the industry in newspapers, magazines, TV, and radio. David Yeager's first book, From Miracle to Menace, Alberta, A Carbon Story, was released just in April of this year. The book analyzes how climate change, carbon politics, and global energy demand have impacted the province and the future of Alberta's and Canada's most important resource industry. With that, I will turn the time over to Mr. Yeager. Thank you, David.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I really want to thank our hosts for allowing me to share the mic with 2 of my favorite pundits on the state of the energy industry, Vivian Krause and Rex Murphy. So it'll be a hoot. Between the 3 of us, you'll leave here knowing pretty well everything that needs to be known. The title, I'll get to the title in a second here. Now, I was told only an idiot could get this wrong. This is the disclaimer. When you copy, there's PDF copies of this available, so when you poach the data for your business plan, marketing study, or look smart in front of the boss, just remember where it came from. So the title is Hard to Kill, and my inspiration is Steven Seagal. There was that movie in 1980 where he's a cop. They put 8 bullets in him, and he refused to die, spent 7 years in a coma. Then he came back, got back into shape, and extracted justice on the perpetrators. And that's how I describe Canada's oil and gas industry. It's just stinking hard to kill. We have combined record oil and gas production of 7.6 million barrels of oil equivalent. We're the 5th largest oil and gas producing jurisdiction in the world, a fact that seems to be unknown, either east of the Ontario-Manitoba border or west of the Great Divide. It's the largest private sector industry in the country behind only residential housing. There is no known substitute for most of the fossil fuel applications yet. And so that's why I say hard to kill. Rumors of our demise are greatly exaggerated. I'm going to take, unlike the kind gentleman who did the introduction, I'm going to take the discussion from the confluence of the bow and elbow to the International Space Station and look at the whole world. And I love the BP World Energy Outlook. It's very similar to Shell or ExxonMobil, International Energy Agency, or Energy Information Administration. They all come up with basically the same data. It's just BP puts it in PowerPoint so I can poach it and have nice clear graphics. So the end user sector is where do we use it? And you see to 2040, you'll see about a 30% increase in energy of all forms. And again, transportation's going up. Industry is a lot. Buildings and the region. OECD is flat. OECD is 1.2 billion people live. That's the Western countries, 34 of them. I'll be coming back to that later. And then China is growing a little bit, and the rest of the world's catching up. So the growth will not come from OECD. Let me define OECD countries. These are Canada, most of Europe. This is where electricity's on a switch on the wall. There's a gas station on the corner, an airport, light transit, all the people that can use emerging technologies or take part in the latest trends where the rest of the world cannot. The fuel mix, oil is going nowhere. BP's at about 110 million barrels a day by 2040. Natural gas is renewables is going up. Natural gas is going up. Coal is not going to disappear. And there's a little more granularity on the fuel mix on this one. Renewables is going to grow significantly, but it's still not going to materially move the needle. Hydro is more flat because more or less flat. You just can't dam a river anymore. Nuclear, although it's carbon free, where do you put it? Coal is flat simply because of its broad use. Natural gas is the big growth area, and oil stays more or less the same. So you can see OI with L below. I fixed this up myself instead of just using BP's version, so there's a few mistakes. So oil is not going down, but as a percentage it's going down. Gas as a percentage are going up. Renewables go up. So the evolving transition scenario, these forecasts are based on not on political speeches, but on data such as population growth, GDP, growing middle class. So they base their forecast based on known data. Now, I'm not a climate change denier. I find I'm safer that way. I don't question the science, because even though I have an unlisted phone number. But what I do, I want to point out that the climate forecasts are based on ice core, tree rings, and lake bottom sediments. Take that into your next management meeting. And I'm not kidding. I'm not here to argue with them. I'm just saying that if you believe that forecast, you have to believe these forecasts, because they're based on more known inputs, such as I said, population growth and GDP. And then by sector, the big one is going to be power, electricity, buildings, industry, and transport. You can see where the growth is coming from, all sectors. The barrel of oil is again, we read regularly how we can just switch to renewables. I believe we're supposed to be fossil fuel free by 2050, according to some of the politicians. Here's where a barrel goes, and this is 25% of a barrel goes into plastics and petrochemicals, which is short of substitutes. 25% goes into airplane and ships. 2 million barrels a day, actually, a year, actually, on straight jet fuel. 2 billion barrels a year, excuse me. 25% is heavy trucks and rail, no substitutes. The soft spot in the forecast is light vehicles, cars and pickups. This really depends on the rate of electric vehicle adoption, and that, of course, a factor of sources of carbon-free electricity and battery storage. So 75% of the demand, 5% goes into power generation in places like, I think, Hawaii. Maui just switched over from natural gas from bunker oil. So there's really two industries in 2019. And they're both represented in the room. So as an oil service guy, I'll treat our customers fairly. There's the producers and production, record production volumes, our solid cash flow, almost double that of 2016. And then there's service and supply, which is we're ready to go to work. Should you call, there's people to answer the phone. Equipment available and manpower. Consumers require the product. And we are seeing some positive development. So it's green light for the producers in the sense, I'll show you some numbers. They're doing quite well. Service and supply is steady, on hold. If you decide to do something, we're still here. The revenue and cash flow, these are ARC's numbers. I love these numbers. I love the period from 2009 to 2014. If you manage to grow your business during this period, don't dislocate your shoulder patting yourself on the back. It was a pretty friendly market. Cash flow went up. CapEx went up. Where we separate les hommes from les garçons is from 2015 to 2019. So it tagged bottom in 2016, certainly from a revenue point of view. It made a recovery, and 2019, as you can see, is materially improved, the best year since 2014, except the CapEx line. There's a reluctance to invest in Canada, which really ties back to economics and pipeline takeaway capacity. The CapEx on oil sands seem to have hit a plateau. Sustaining capital seems to be in that $12 to $13 billion a year range, where conventional CapEx is going to be based on, I'll get into gas prices and so on, but that is a little more discretionary than keeping your existing assets going. And it is down again, actually, to the lowest level on this page. Production volumes, there's the mix, 7.6 million BOE a day, with the growth being the oil sands. It's just incredible what's happened. Up 2 million BOE a day this century. This is a disturbing number. This is CapEx over cash flow. And this is what percentage of the free cash for reinvestments going back in the ground. It hit the highest level of 180% in 2015. That was quite by accident. They had a lot of projects underway in the oil sands in particular when the cash flow dried up, but they couldn't really stop. And then it was pretty high in 2011 and 2012. That was the Montney Duvernay leasing boom. And then in 2018, it's been sagging. 2019, for what is known to ARC, when I updated these figures last week, they've got their cash flow model and their known CapEx. So this is the lowest reinvestment ratio that, again, on the page, and that is obviously a shame. We're Canada's fifth largest producer on a BOE basis. So there's Canada. The United States is number one. Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran Iran, you think they have a problem with oil, big gas producer, and there's the top 10. It's not, I don't see this as enthusiastically as I used to, but I'll stick with Canada. Production operating costs is another area that's really not followed in the CapEx. A lot of the analysts just cover CapEx, but OpEx, as you all know in this room, is a big business as well. These are a year late because cap data doesn't come out till September. But in 1998, it took 8.3 billion a year to keep the thing going. Last year, in 2017, it took almost 41. And oil sands OpEx exceeded conventional for the first time in 2011. So this is a number that's going to stay pretty steady as long as you are producing 7.6 million BOE a day. So if you're in the business of keeping things going, well, that looks pretty good. Operating costs, again, there's the bar graphs, the total. It's come off a little bit, actually. I've got a slide coming up on that. The major gain has been unit cost in oil sands. I've got a separate slide. Producing well base, there's 225,000 active wells mixed between oil and gas. There's 130,000 suspended wells. We read in the paper about the orphan wells and the number of wells that are piling up. Many of them are actually shut in because of poor gas. A lot of them are water wet or liquid wet gas wells, sour gas, that's just not economical to fix them. Most of the oil that can produce if you can get it into the pipe or in a rail car will go, but a lot of those gas wells would be put back on stream if we got an improvement in gas markets. Production operating cost. This is Suncor's. I looked at the annual reports for a lot of oil companies. A lot of the big operators put operating costs as a line item, and some add a little granularity. So this was Suncor's granularity from their notes to their audited financial statements. So they spend $12 billion a year to keep it going, and you can see a big chunk in contractors, many in this room, their staff, materials, energy. Energy was quite small, actually. I thought energy would be the fuel used to create the heat for bitumen separation, and not bad thanks to low gas prices, rentals, travel, and transportation, is shipping and pipelines. So that's where the pie goes. And when I was the chairman of the Petroleum Services Association of Canada, most of the models on how big the oil service industry is used to just be CapEx and the rig count. And I insisted that we also start including OpEx because just so many companies work in that space. And here's Seven Generations is up in the Montney. They're even more granular. This is their $1 billion. And they've got pipelines and takeaway is 40%. But they break it down into equipment rental, staff, contractors, chemicals, property taxes. Look at that number. That's the hidden sleeping tax that everybody pays and nobody mentions, and trucking and so on. The oil sands is increasingly competitive. I thought this was very interesting when I looked at these numbers. And these are right out of the CAP Statistical Handbook, and I'm looking forward to seeing the 2018 numbers soon. But that was the production on an annual basis, 2.2 million barrels a day. There's the total OPEX, and there's the cost per barrel. Phenomenal. $31 a barrel in 2014 to $19 a barrel in 2017. Part of that's natural gas. Part of that is, well, the service guys. I'm not here to complain on behalf of the service industry. Part of it's efficiency. And so the oil sands are really phenomenal, actually. One of the things that we hear from the Greens is that the oil sands are non-competitive and uneconomic. And that's just not true. That's just not true. If you've got a plant that's up and running today with the low decline rates and almost inexhaustible reserve base, it's just a wonderful piece of business. Biggest resource business in Canada in 2019. So here is my guess of what we're going to spend this year. Not a great year, but certainly not the end of the world if you look at other industries in Canada. Operating costs, $22 billion for conventional, $19 billion for oil sands. CapEx, the ARC numbers are 30, so it's $71 billion. And to put this in perspective, that's almost to say pretty close to the provincial governments of the three prairie provinces. So I think sometimes we got to get a little more of a half-full perspective on our business every now and then. You know, you got 117 billion in revenue, 71 in reinvestment, even in a bad year, 50 billion in free cash flow. I mean, you know, it's great, isn't what it was, but as I say, hard to kill. Canadian crude prices. Now this is a recovery from near death in November when bitumen, just plain old goop, almost went no bid in places. So this is National Energy Board data. A barrel of conventional, say, chops conventional oil, heavy oil production went averaged at $10 in November. And then Western Canada Select was averaging wherever it was. And this is when the curtailment issue came up, and that's been controversial. But it has made quite a comeback in prices. Part of that was temporary. There's some seasonal shutdowns in refineries and so on. But that really was a confidence-shattering event, I think, for a lot of investors and a lot of people in the industry. We have recovered from it on paper. I don't know if we fully recovered from it psychologically. Alberta gas reference price, this is the job killer that really doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. There's the quarterly Alberta gas reference price off the Government of Alberta website. The average price in 2014 was $3.86, off a little in 2015. The average price for the 4 quarters, $2.86. Last year, $1.34, 2019, $1.23, and I was out with a guy, worked for, he was the IT manager of a quickly disappearing gas producer, and there the spot price one day for AECO was 10 cents. And so I remember back in 1991, I heard this speech from the head, a guy from Louisiana, really funny. He was head of the Independent Petroleum Association of America, and he said, "They say natural gas is the fuel of the future. It must be because it has no present value." Anyway, that's still 27 years later, 28 years later, it still rings true. Here is what they like to do. Here is the CAP forecast for oil production that just came out this month, or last month, it's June now. And they see by 2035, the industry would like to put on roughly another 1.3 million barrels a day in the next 16 years. Primarily oil sands. You see light conventional crude staying steady, natural gas liquid staying steady, with the growth being in oil sands production. There's a pipeline capacity of 4 million barrels a day, which is fixed. Here's crude by rail. Crude by rail really started in 2012. And in 2016, you can see what happened in June of 2016, just 3 months after the price collapse. The cost of shipping greatly exceeded the spread, so they abandoned the contracts. Things started to pick up in early 18. So the producers phoned back the railroads and said, "Hi, we'd like to ship some oil by rail." And who's this? Oh yeah, you're the guys that punted us in 2016. Oh yeah, but what could we do, So anyway, so that took off. We got up to 354,000 barrels a day in December. Curtailment came along, the spread narrowed, and it dropped off. But again, it's recovering again because, so it is, there's the curtailment, impact of curtailment the month after it happened, but it's ramping back up. The latest statistics I have is April, but all indications are this will ramp up for now and should take away the difference, help take away the difference between the fixed pipeline capacity and production growth. New pipelines, maybe. My experience in writing about this industry for 40 years is the success of this industry is inversely proportional to how frequently we're on the front page. And we've been living on the front page for most of this century. And I don't think most people knew what a pipeline was until recent times. But anyway, here's what we've got today. Enbridge Line 3, allegedly in service in 2020. A little scrap, a little bun fight with the regulators in Minnesota. The Canadian section's built for what it's worth. And so maybe. Trans Mountain was reapproved, approved for the second time. Nice pictures of pipe traveling through yards, through downtown. Hope so. Keystone XL is the last thing until yesterday was the Supreme Court decision in Nebraska. Another lawsuit got filed in Montana, which included suing President Trump for endangerment to wildlife species. Now, that's sure far away to raise money. Suing Trump's probably good for donations in much of the United States. I'm not sure it'll fix anything. So the point is there are three pipes on the books that, when completed, would take away all the forecast capacity. And that's how these forecasts work. They look at the projects that are still alive, and then they look at the pipe projects that are still alive. And so there is a set of circumstances, not next year, but perhaps in 2021, where the light at the end of this increasingly long tunnel is not a train. But a little history that I dug up from the book, and this was fun. The original pipeline, the original interprovincial pipeline from Edmonton to Superior, Wisconsin, was conceived, approved by 7 governments. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Canada, and the United States. It was cooked up. They passed the enabling legislation in the House of Commons, built the darn thing. It was shipping oil in 20 months. And that is, that's about the time it takes the photocopier on application nowadays. Trans Mountain to Burnaby. God, they were happy. 19 months, 3 governments, Alberta, BC, they loved it. They were importing oil. They thought it was fantastic. West Coast Transmission. This was a little longer. One of the challenges back then was the government of Alberta didn't think we had enough gas to sell it, so they were not that enthusiastic about gas exports. But anyway, they were burning wood chips in the lower mainland for heat in the winter, wet wood chips. So we actually saved the lives of many generations of future pipeline haters by replacing their fuel supply. And in 1958, the government of Canada, a Liberal government, smashed it, just said, no, we want some pipe. They were shipping gas from Texas and everything all over the United States, and why can't we have some gas? So that actually almost they did bring down eventually the Liberal government of the day, but that was that was built in, took a little longer, 5 years, big debates of the House of Commons because they wanted an all-Canadian line, but bingo, we got gas. We put Ontario on gas 61 years ago. Is it true? I heard that last night sitting from some of the hosts, Mammut guys, and they said Kitimat's just rocking. So they're trying. Shell-backed LNG Canada made their decision. They publicly announced that they'll be working on it. This is a $40 billion project. Instead of suing the project and the developers, the BC government actually put in some financial incentives. Ottawa did the same. This is big. This would take 3 BCF out of the 16 BCF a day Canadian gas market. That's a nice bump. This is going to be the first step in making gas move. There is a court challenge, of course, by the approval process. When they approved the pipeline, it originated in BC and ended in BC, so they didn't think it was required federal approval. And one of the professional prosperity haters in BC is insisting that because it's connected through the backwoods to Alberta, it requires NEB approval, and they're trying to go back to the drawing board. I talked to my friends at well, they don't call themselves TransCanada anymore because they're embarrassed, TC Energy, and I talked to my friends at TC Energy. Am I going to get arrested? If you tape this and put it on Twitter, I could be washed up. Anyway, and then there's objections over the right of way, but it would appear this thing's got a little bit of momentum, and hopefully we'll get her done. The real world. So this is how the world looks from the International Space Station. There are 7.4 billion people on planet Earth, and all but 30 million of them don't live in Canada. And only 1.2 billion live in the OECD countries. So there's 6.2 billion people really want in. 1 billion people in the world don't have electricity. So when you look at the future of energy and the future of civilization, this is an incredibly powerful force. This is an incredibly powerful force. They only care about tomorrow. What do you think the weather's going to be like? Are you concerned about the water level of your river in the year 2050? Are you nuts? My family's starving. They have no capacity to pay more for anything. So that's the real world. And this is where the growth is going to happen, primarily here in Africa. And the only OECD member companies on this view of the world are Australia, Japan, and South Korea. And meanwhile, in Canada, we are the only major gas oil producer in the world determined to obstruct oil and gas exports, where we've specifically passed a law prohibiting the export of oil to hungry world energy markets. We've got carbon taxes. There's an anti-oil bias. You know that. There's the 2 bills they passed. Significant regional opposition to pipelines, significant investor chill. But if you haven't heard this here before, my 2 other speakers, I'm sure will say this, 0.5% of the population of the world, we can't save the planet. Just say it. The progress paradox. Here's Greta Thunberg. She's the 16-year-old that went to the World Economic Forum and told them all this was a climate emergency. But when I wrote the book, one of the best books I read was The Progress Paradox, written in 2003 by an author named Greg Easterbrook. And these are quotes out of his book. And Western civilization had gotten so frothy that society was under a fundamental shift from material want to meaning want, like food, clothing, and shelter was all provided. You didn't have to look under rocks for food. so you could worry about whether you were happy or not. And Easterbrook, God bless him, and you can all read it, but I'll read it to you. We should be glad that we have enough leisure and prosperity that we're allowed to feel depressed, because it's better to be prosperous, free, and unhappy than maybe fighting a war, starving, sleeping under a bridge, or all the other alternatives. So this is, in a perverse way, this is progress. But that's really what this is about. It's not, we oil guys, we tend to be so logical, that, well, you can't, how can you fill up with gasoline on the way to a pipeline protest? But anyway, it's the way it is now. So this is what I couldn't think of any other way to describe this except the parallel universe. And this is right out of the science fiction I grew up in as a kid. You're walking down the street, and this guy beside you, hi, how's it going? Nice blue sky. No, it's green. Ooh, and away you go. It's about emotion, not facts. It's incredible. Those demanding change, demanding we quit using fossil fuels, we can't even agree on a single set of facts. I mean, they say, well, we can get rid of fossil fuels by 2050. Well, how? By yelling louder. Regional solutions won't solve the problems. And climate change is no longer about the composition of the atmosphere. What I discovered in the book, it's actually an industry. It is. There's a lot of people figured out how to make money on climate change without changing the CO2 content. And so so there's us, which is, I assume, regular folks that understand how the place works, and then there's everybody else. And the two planets look quite similar, don't they? So 10 steps to building investor confidence. I'm talking as quickly as I can here. 10 steps, 10 things, boxes to check. 2 down, 8 to go. But every one of these is within our grasp. I mean, there's nothing out of here. There's no cold fusion involved in this. There's no technological advancement that doesn't exist, no miracles. So we got a new Alberta government. We had to do that. We got her done. We got the Trans Mountain approval. Hopefully they'll build it. Change the federal government. And change it didn't say replace. I think that even as I read it, Rex will know more about this when you get him in here, is there even within the Liberal Party, there's some question as to whether that they've got the right guy for the long-term future of the company. Obviously, we get rid of 69 and 48. As I wrote a column last month that you'll never have to worry about Bill 48 because nobody will bother to apply to build a pipeline to the West Coast under 69. Finish Line 3, finish Keystone XL, build LNG Canada. Get Tech Frontier going. Boy, they'd like to build that darn thing. And tell Esso it's okay. You can come back now and go dig the dirt on Imperial Aspen. But you wouldn't know the place if we checked these other 8 boxes and really got back in the game and maintained our commitment to be the most safest and most environmentally responsible hydrocarbon producer on God's green earth. It doesn't have to be like this. And again, the reason I'm excited about these 8 points is they are within our grasp. There's nothing that we're not deciding on in the next year or two. So strategies for 2019, hard to kill. Don't give up now. If you've come this far, for gosh sake, stick with it. Producers have billions. The oil companies have a lot of dry powder. If we can find a way to make Canada more attractive again. Rising production is rising op cost spending. The Alberta government's going to change. There is a federal election in October. Who knows? LNG exports will re-energize LNG. Will re-energize gas markets. The 3 pipelines aren't dead. Count the pennies. Run a tight ship. And of course, that's about it. That's pretty well explains everything. I don't know if we need to. We can probably go home. I'm just kidding. Here's my book. I'm not here to sell my book. I'm here to answer your questions. Thank you very much. My favorite subject.